so it's working. All right, cool.
Hello.
All right, so I think we're live on both sets. We should be anyway.
Hello, Rumbly. Rumblies and YouTubies.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how things work. And I left everything set up the way it was last time because I haven't done any streaming since then. So it was pretty easy to leave everything set up to just do both. So we'll see who all pops in, if anybody tonight. We'll go ahead and do our thing regardless. Um, so I guess while we're waiting on everybody to filter in, Mike, I know you've been kind of messing with Astrobot, which I picked up.
Mm. Played that last night. Started
Yeah.
it last night. Man,
Every time
what
I mess with
a
that one, it looks. Every time I see that one, it looks fun.
yeah, what a nice game. Um, it's a it's kind of a an extension or maybe a sequel to Astro's Playroom,
Yeah,
which
no,
actually is
that's
a
what it struck me as.
which actually is also a sequel to Astro. Astrobot started, if I remember correctly, as a PSVR game, which is where I played it first on the first PSVR. That's where I first had it. Hey, what's up? What's up, Camaro? Camaro, what's up, Torso?
Yeah, I've got chat popping up in here, but I don't have it actually
Hi.
popping up to where I can link it. That's kind of weird. I don't know why. It should be. Unless something happened. I have no idea. I don't know. So we may not have chat. Oh, there's Sai.
I see Sai.
Yep. Sai's popped in, and my headphones are acting weird tonight, so I'm going to have some weird echo on my end. Looks like mostly people popping in on the YouTube side, which is cool. But yeah, no, that's one of those I've been meaning to start. And I knew it would be an extension of like the original one that came out as a launch game on the PS5 that got loaded with it, which I think kind of took everybody by a huge surprise. Because it was kind of a new IP and a very playful IP for Sony, which really hadn't done anything like that in a long time. And you kind of
Well,
forget how good they are at it.
well, not just you right, and not just that, but the nostalgia factor for those who have played PlayStation games for a long time to pick up, a lot of the nostalgia is really cool, and how they weave that to the game.
Yeah.
Um, it's challenging, but it's not crazy difficult.
Yeah, it was never
So,
intended to be. The first one wasn't either. It had a few minor parts that were kind of a little bit tougher than
right,
others, but it was never really designed to be a tough game. It was meant to, one, show off the controller, first and foremost,
correct.
and two, to give them kind of a new, more playful mascot, right? In order to be able to kind of play around with. And that's something that we don't get a lot of these days, which will kind of lead into our topic later on. Um, but yeah, other than that, what all have you had going on? I know you've had a bunch of stuff with like music and stuff like that in real life going on recently.
Oh yeah. So so this weekend I had a huge uh band gig wedding on Saturday night, which but work has been exhausting. But I've also been, you know, I didn't think that I would enjoy Antstream Arcade the way I have.
You've really
The
been getting
point,
into that lately.
yeah. In fact, it led us to become we're Antstream partners. So we officially, it's kind of cool, and one of the perks of being an Antstream partner, which I am looking forward to for when it comes out. I'm the voiceover on this week's upcoming Antstream update video that they put out.
Right.
So kind of some neat stuff. It's funny because being an Antstream partner doesn't really get me anything other than just to be able to say it. I bought Antstream, so
Yeah, you bought like the
I had
lifetime
bought it
membership, didn't you, on the Xbox?
on the Xbox,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, what's up, Chuck?
Yeah, we got Chalk, we
And
got
Batman.
Batman. For some reason Ninja Chat's not working inside OBS for whatever reason, so I can't pull up your comments tonight, guys. Sorry about that. I don't know why that's broken. I didn't even think to check it because the tool was still there and it looked like it was fine. And then I popped out the chat and It appears to not be
Yeah, let me.
fine. I don't know.
All right, Rumble chat's working. All right, so it is pulling it in. No.
Yeah, no, I mean it's pulling into the mainstream, and we're definitely live on both sides. So, but it's not popping it to where I can like click on anything on the Ninja chat, which is kind of like weird and bizarre, and I have no idea what
That is
happened.
weird.
So
That is weird.
that's kind of broken right now. So I don't know what's going on there. Um, yeah, so I said Nick's starting to look like one of those Game of Thrones Northern Lords that gives Jon Snow a hard time, but then eventually commits to the battle.
Right. Right.
Well, and
It
I
gets
trimmed
more.
this back too because it was starting to get kind of obnoxious and kind of irritating to deal with, and it was starting to go in weird directions. And I'm like, okay, so I can't grow like one of those really, really long beards unless I'm willing to put a crap ton of work into it, which wasn't the point of the beard in the first place. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to keep it trimmed a little bit to where about the length that it'll kind of behave, right? And kind of leave it at that.
Epic. More epic as it grows. What's up, Scrambles?
So scrambles.
Um. So yeah. So you know, one of the things that Microsoft really missed the boat on is making the substantial upgrades to their controller. And it reminds me of that. What reminds me of that are when I dust off the PlayStation and play
Yeah.
with the DualSense.
Well, I feel like they have a solid controller design, and the Elite controller does a lot of cool stuff and did some minor innovations, but they
Yeah,
really
but
haven't done much to change the feel of the experience, right? Like
they
Sony
haven't.
has.
And like when you're playing Astrobot, for example, and the sounds that are coming out of the controller are not just like beeps and boops. They're real they're real sounds coming out from the game.
Yeah,
And
and
you
they've been
know,
doing that since the PlayStation 4 because the PlayStation 4 could do that as well.
the PlayStation 4 did not have a
It has
speaker in it.
speaker.
There's only
Oh yeah, it has speaker. It has
the
speaker.
hang on.
I guarantee you, it had a
Yes,
speaker.
not hold on, because I have a DualShock 4.
Mike never believes me and has to run off to grab something as an example, even though I know exactly the voices came from the PlayStation 4 controller. And no, guys, they were not in my head.
It's the haptic feedback that I was thinking
Yeah,
of.
the haptic feedback, while
The
it was
haptic
there,
feedback was
it's
not
not
in the
nearly as
DualShock.
upgraded as it was in the PS5. The PS5
Right.
is a totally new beast.
And there's no right, and there's no microphone in it.
Correct.
So
Correct.
now
Yeah.
that I think about it, one of the games that I played that had the sound in the
Even Metal
in that
Torso's
was
like PS4 had a PS4.
no
controller had a
no
speaker.
it takes now so the reason I didn't think so game that I was thinking of that actually has the sound in it, and for whatever reason I thought I was playing it on PS5 was Gravity the hell is that Japanese Sugar.
I have no idea what you're talking about right now. There's no game called Sugar that I'm aware of.
No, hang on. There was there was a game out of Sony. No, there was a game out of Sony Japan. It was one of the first PlayStation 4 games that I really had, and it did have sound that came out of the controller, and for whatever reason I had that in my head that was PS5. And now I can't remember what in the heck game it was. But it was really hang on. I'm looking because now it's gonna bother me
It's gonna bug the
until
crap out of you. Yeah, yeah.
it is. And it's the second game in its series.
I truly don't know what game you're talking about. Otherwise, I'd be trying to help right now because these
Gravity
awkward
something
silences
or
when
other.
we look things up are always kind of weird.
Yeah, Gravity something or other.
Oh, you're talking about Gravity Rush.
Am I talking about Gravity Rush?
I think you're talking about Gravity Rush.
I could very well be talking about
Because Gravity Rush had one that originally popped up on the PSP or the PS
Yeah,
Vita,
Gravity.
and
Okay,
then they migrated it over to the PlayStation, and then they made a
That's
second
the one,
one.
Gravity Rush 2.
Yeah,
It was Gravity Rush 2.
yeah.
And now that I think about it, that was PS4, not PS5. And you're right. That definitely that was the first time I had heard sound coming out of a controller at
Yeah.
some point.
Yeah.
So
The Wii U did it as well, and actually did it quite well,
yeah,
quite frankly.
it did it quite. Yeah, the Wii U did it. The Wii tried to do it. I didn't.
What's
I
up,
think the
Scepter? Good to
didn't
see you,
the,
man. But
did the
yeah, no,
original Wii.
the
God, what?
PlayStation had it with PlayStation 4. The Wii U, I think, they came out
No.
before and had it before then on its main controller, right? The big tablet controller.
Yeah, I think it did have a
And that
stupid on
helped
it.
with a
So.
couple of games. There were a couple of games that were really cool that use that. The PlayStation 5 kept that ability as it moved forward, but really changed the haptic feedback. And the touch
Yep.
portion gets used here and there. But
Yeah, yeah.
the Wii Store used to have
That part.
TurboGrafx and PC Engine games. Yes, and I think the Switch Store does too, Chuck. So I think that's still kind of out there and alive. But yeah, I didn't do much myself this weekend. I did some Street Fighter with the guys on Saturday. As far as some gaming goes, we started our vacation, so I was getting some chores done over the weekend, so I wouldn't have to
Nice.
deal in the week while we're off during the week. So I was a little late getting to some videos and stuff because work's been really, really busy, and I've been kind of feeling the burnout. So it's nice to kind of have the time off this week to be able to just do some projects and hopefully catch up on a couple other things because there's a couple things I've been wanting to do that me and Nicole need to do together that we haven't been able to schedule because she's been too busy and I've been too busy. Hey, Eugene, good to see you, man.
Hey, what's up, Eugene? Hey, Scepter. Scepter's up on Rumble.
Certain controller we never got to have also had a speaker. Yes. Yes, it did, Si. Yeah, I'm not going into that mess. I'm going to leave that one alone. So yeah, this week I plan on getting a few projects done, stuff like that around the house, and get a video out. Maybe get a couple more scripts written out, and get working on. I have another Mario video that I'm working on because somebody had asked a while back, like, what was Mario's history, and I'm like, well, I've touched base on it a couple of times here and there, but I've never really tried to do anything more comprehensive. So I got a lot written up, and I got the voiceover recorded, so I want to do some editing on it this week. But before we lose too many people here, because
Jump man.
What's funny is the YouTube chat is popping, and there's like nobody out there in Rumble Land. It's kind of funny. Scepter's like it's like Scepter and Mike, I think, and that's it.
They all came to They all came down to.
They all came to
today.
YouTube, which is fine by me. I don't care. Watch where you want to watch. So,
Be who
yeah,
you want to be.
the show we have tonight is kind of talking about modernizing retro games, and there's a couple perspectives that I kind of want to cover that on from kind of an angle. One of them is I kind of want to cover it from like remakes that are made with more modern sensibilities, talking about it from a social and PC standpoint, and one from a modern convenience and modern conveniences as well, and another one from how much of it is just kind of modern day preservation, because a lot of these games aren't really sold anymore or aren't released anymore anywhere, or they're basically the way the market's kind of moving is they're realistically removing your ability to be able to keep the physical copies or move these physical copies forward in any way so that they can just sell these to you again down the road whenever they remaster them. Because there's fewer and fewer companies that are really wanting to do a lot of backwards compatibility unless you're on PC and you're willing to just continue to maintain a PC, because most of that stuff from Steam will continue to function. They generally try to keep away most of these things being able to function because your purchase is your purchase. But a lot of the stores have started to shut down, which is why it's kind of been a struggle for a lot of people to maintain their libraries, particularly things that didn't have a physical release at all. Like there are versions of like Contra and Castlevania, and then there was a Darkstalkers game that was released, and these are all like Wii U store kind of things that if you have them and they're on your hard drive, you can still play them. That's fine. Now, the Xbox Live Arcade version of Darkstalkers that got released, I don't know. That may have needed like some sort of log on them. With that store down, it's sketchy whether or not this will continue to function. So, kind of modernizing these are doing collections, which Capcom's been doing a bang up job on lately. is really the way that they see moving forward to be able to do this kind of game preservation if you don't have a physical copy of it or unable to maintain your older hardware that supported these. And we all know how well some of the early 360s continued to thrive. Red Ring of Death.
Yeah.
You know, you had PlayStation 2s.
$2 billion.
Do what?
$2 billion.
Yeah. What's up, Brian? Good
Anyway.
to see you, man. Brian F's in the chat.
Ryan.
And Scepter and Mike are having a chat over on the Rumble side on their own. All by themselves.
All by myself. Me and Scepter are all by yourself. That's right.
I honestly did
You
not
guys
expect
don't.
to
You
be
guys.
going.
You guys don't get to be in the cool club anymore.
I didn't actually expect my Rumble channel to be doing exceptionally well lately, because everybody's been kind of having weird viewership stuff going on, and my channel is primarily focused on uploads at this point. At least this section of it. I am probably this week I may set up a streaming channel. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet, but if I get froggy and I want to stream, then I'll probably start doing it there. That way it doesn't muddle the other channel that really does kind of need its vibe to kind of stay very similar to the YouTube channel. Oh, Panda 2000. Panda 2000 raid.
He doesn't. Hold on. He said he's supposed to be sending some people over. He just doesn't know how to raid. Luke. Hopefully Luke showed him. Hopefully Luke showed him.
I've shown him how to raid multiple times. He just never uses it, so it never sticks in his brain. Of course, he's addled right now anyway. That man doesn't sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, that man. He is. Well, okay. Hold on. Because he's a liar, is what this man is. I just want to point out that he is a liar.
What, Panda?
Yesterday, he put out a video on X saying it's time for him to take a break. It's time for him to take a break. He's been doing this. He's had 4 days off in like 10 years, and he needs a break. And then today, he puts out a video on X. I got this idea. Y'all are going to love it.
What did you expect, sir? And I think he actually probably will take a break. He'll take a break because he'll pass out and he'll be in hospital for a couple weeks.
Right. And then he'll come back strong.
And then he'll be feeling great.
Right.
DJC's on the Rumble side. Luke is on the Rumble side. We got about 14 people popping in. I imagine they're coming in from Panda's side. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the chat. So I am having difficulty with NinjaBot, so if I don't pull up your comment, don't feel bad. I just can't. For whatever reason, right now, my Ninja chat is not behaving, and so it's giving me kind of like random issues. So I don't really know what's going on with that, but I don't really want to fiddle with this stream because we're already live and we're kind of running, so I'll deal with it on a different day. And Luke's like,
all feel horrible
everywhere.
Yeah, you should all feel horrible.
So yeah, I thought what we do today is we talk about
exactly, Luke. Yesterday he swore he was taking a break. Today he's got 12 new shows coming. Exactly.
Yeah, well, of course he does.
Okay.
And you'll see them in like 8 to 15 years.
That's a good point.
It takes him a long time.
That's about right.
You guys really, like, I've talked to Panda on the side a lot. And for those of you guys that visit his channel,
you guys have no idea.
That kind of more social relationship with him because I've known him for like forever and I've streamed with him forever. The amount of work this man will put into like a scene you might see for 3 seconds is insane.
Insane.
He might put 3 months of work into something that takes up 3 seconds of time because it means that much for him to have it look the way he wants it to look. And that's just the kind of person he is. So when he says he's working on it, he really is. He's not slacking on it. He's working his butt off. The problem is it takes forever for him to get that stuff together the way he's comfortable releasing it. And so the good thing about it is you always get really good high quality content out of it. The bad thing is it almost works him to death trying to get it out, and it takes forever. And some people just go, well, you're never going to get this out. Well, yeah, he does. He always does. It just takes a very long time.
Yes.
It's
It's like
generally always
really
worth
it's
the
like
wait.
it's like the Snyder cut of Batman, of Justice League.
Big
Eventually you'll
block.
get it.
Panda 2000 raid, or would be if he knew how.
He probably just said, you know what, screw it. Just type in RetroRoots. Type in Geekstorian. Get over there on your own.
So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and move into the topic. Thank you everybody who's coming into the chat. If you guys don't know,
Welcome,
tonight
everybody.
we're gonna be talking kind of like remakes of games that are made with more modern sensibilities or modern conveniences in mind, and how much of it is kind of sticking with preservation, which is a topic we kind of talk about off and on a lot here. We've talked about it from the arcade point, from people preserving arcade machines. We've talked it from the emulation side. We've talked about it from re-releases of games. And tonight I kind of want to take a little slightly different spin where people have kind of gone in and altered the existing games in one way or another. That could be so much as like toning down some of the things. Hey, what's up, Jeff? Go again goes in.
Jeff!
Whether or not that's kind of some of the things that they've done, they kind of make it more palatable for the quote unquote modern audience.
Modern audience.
Which I don't necessarily agree with. And we'll kind of go into why and see how you guys feel about that, because you may feel a bit differently. And if you do, feel free to go ahead and post it up. I'd love to have a discussion on this. That's what this forum has always been about. It's not about, what I say goes. It's about me having a dialogue and us having a dialogue with you, the viewers, right? So if you have an opinion on this, or you have a game that you really like that's had a remake or a remaster, that you thought they did a really good job of both modernizing it mechanically, doing the resolution of it right and staying true to it, or you liked the changes that they did to it because the original was kind of dated in how it was handled, then yeah, go ahead and bring that one up. I'd love to talk about it. So I do have a few of these that I've just kind of thrown in a list, that I've kind of played through a couple of these, and some of these I haven't played the remake, and I haven't even really played the original. And some of these aren't even really remakes, they're kind of like sequels, right? So you've got Tomb Raider, which was like a remake of the original Tomb Raider, with the more...
Okay, which ones are you talking about?
I'm talking about the repop that they did, where they kind of went back to...
Okay.
Well, they re-envisioned the original kind of Tomb Raider, where they wanted to tell more of her origin story, not the very first game where she's already like, a badass tomb raiding hunter, big buxom girl.
Right. All right.
The more sensible approach to her character design and trying to build her into that character.
So I don't necessarily... Okay, and this is good, because I think, as we always do here, which ends up happening when we're talking about these games, I don't necessarily consider those remakes. I consider those...
I consider that a complete repop of the series.
So there's a I think of it as they're prequels, right? And in those prequels, you have an opportunity somewhat like what Star Wars did, what J.J. Abrams did with Star Trek, rather. Sorry,
I was
Star
about
Trek.
to say, you said J.J. Abrams and you said Star Wars,
no,
and
no.
my brain went on the fritz.
I mean, theoretically,
I mean,
Force
he's worked
Awakens,
on both, but one was sequels, not prequels.
Yeah, correct. So, and really, Star Trek wasn't prequel as much; it was reboot. I think it was
basically a repop, considering a different universe of such.
Right, and that's where I
put
one
that he'd like to talk about too, Wonder Boy: The Dragon's Trap, which I don't think I've played that. You can switch between 8-bit graphics and the animated HD graphics seamlessly, and there's been a couple that have done that. What's up, Stampede?
Right. Stampede. So let's finish the Tomb Raider, because I think there's a distinction, and I can kind of level it. The Tomb Raider, Rise of the Tomb Raider, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, those are, to me, those are prequels, because they do two things. Number one, they establish her character, but like you said before, the call it the 1990 whatever year that was that Tomb Raider came out on PC and
Yeah,
Saturn.
because when they first started doing the Tomb Raider series, there wasn't really a ton of backstory done on Laura. I mean, you kind of got
Correct.
some as the games progressed, a little bit here and there,
So
because you'd have people that come in that you knew, and then you talk a little bit about her interactions with them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, kind of
right.
flashback-ish type things that you may or may not play.
Right. So where this series went was giving her that backstory and giving her doing kind of what they did with Star Trek, where they were able to take young Kirk prior to going into Starfleet and mold their characters to open up a new universe. So that's what those three games did, more than what, say, this year's Tomb Raider 1 through 3 remaster did, which was take those original games, remaster the graphics, and retool the controls.
Right. But they didn't make
That
any
to me is more.
alterations to the character physically or anything on the story on those that I'm
They
aware
did
of.
not.
I think they
No, they
left
did
those
not. They
intact. Yeah. But
correct.
that's not always the case because they were talking about, and this is kind of jumping around a little bit because this one hasn't really come out yet. But they were talking about KOTOR and how they were going to basically alter it for like modern sensibilities. And usually, anytime
Right.
anybody says something like that, I start getting nervous because you have something. It's kind of like when George Lucas would take the Star Wars movies and he kept dinking with them, right? He would he kept changing little bits and adding little bits here and there. And unless you have a really old VHS tape, you don't have a copy of his original work anymore because there's been too many alterations over the years, right?
Yeah, but the alterations, to me, the alterations that he made to those movies were a bit more visual than they were. Like they didn't change the story any. They if anything, they cleaned things up.
Okay.
How many
Hold on a
consoles will they
second.
put The Last of Us on?
Yeah, finish your thought, and then I gotta talk about a couple of comments that have
I
popped in chat that are
I
really good.
I just saw it. I just saw it. KOTOR KOTOR will just take this really quickly. The remake is supposed to be um what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to they think it's fixing because and I don't know where they're coming up with that fix, but um it's supposed to be a fixing of the entire gameplay scheme, which that's a whole different thing.
I mean, from a modern standpoint, it might feel a little clunky, but I don't think there was anything wrong with the original gameplay scheme.
I,
But
I didn't either. It wasn't an action game,
no,
and that's
it
what
was never
I'm
meant to be an
hoping
action
they're
game. You could move a little bit more than you could a standard RPG, but it worked under
it
normal RPG mechanics.
exactly, and that's what I'm.
Or
I
I'll
mean,
call it what it is, JRPG mechanics, which for some reason became a slang term, like a derogatory slang term for some reason, and I just used it as a classification of an RPG because you had westernized RPGs, which were more
I
action
don't
focused,
remember.
and then you had Japanese RPGs, which used to just be called RPGs because they were the main ones making them, that were more
Right.
turn based. And I just used it to distinguish the two different types.
I don't remember. I didn't know that became slang
It
because
did for
I
a
have
bit. I
always
don't
used.
know if people are still calling it
Really?
that, but it was kind of considered that way for a while.
Yeah, I see JRPG all the time. I
I,
see ARPG all the time for action role playing game.
right.
I see um I forgot what they call Western RPGs now, but that maybe they just call them Western RPGs.
I
But I
think that's
mean,
the more popular term used for them. Go Get Go actually mentioned there's a Mr. Driller and Drill Land that moved from the GameCube to
yeah,
Switch. Um, and Link's Awakening on Switch, which is another one I actually want to talk about that I thought was an amazing remake that not only made the style like almost more endearing than the original, but also added some quality of life stuff that I thought was actually quite good.
and that's a remake from the DX, right?
Well, it was
or was that
on.
or the color
I think it was on
or the
Game
Game
Boy,
Boy
and then it was
Color?
on Game Boy Color, and
Oh,
then it got remade because they it wasn't. I think it was on the original Game Boy, and then they did a color version of it that made it just color. Right, it was the same game. They didn't really do much else to it, and then it got released on the Switch. And now they have the the Zelda game that's coming out this week that I'm forgetting the name of. I want to say it's like something Wisdom. That's in that same art style that I think is going to be really fun and cute. I'm looking forward to picking that up at some point. A ton of stuff is
gotcha.
coming out this week that I want to play that I'm not going to have time to get through all of it by any means, and my backlog is just continuing to grow. It's getting ridiculous. Um, but here's a couple others. I'm just going to throw them off in rapid order. And then some of these are just sequels that have kind of brought these games back to light, and some of these are like remakes. Streets of Rage 4 I put on here because it's just a sequel, but that's kind of brought Streets of Rage
Yeah, that's a
back into the
sequel.
limelight again, which is great,
Yes.
and kind of started bringing beat 'em ups kind of back into the forefront again. There's a couple more coming out. There's a GI Joe one coming out this week that I'm pretty excited for. Paper Mario: A Thousand Year Door that went from the GameCube to the Switch, where they made some alterations to some of the characters' dialogue and stuff like that that was now considered offensive. Instead of some of the Goombas whistling at a lady, they say some other dialogue, and one of the characters that like
I
to
respect you.
that like to dress as a female or identified as female or whatnot is now
Oh
trans.
God. Oh
Um,
God.
Kind of stuff like that. And then you have stuff like the Lollipop Chainsaw, which I had never played when it came out originally, and I picked up the repop version mostly because, and I sort of did it out of spite, and it was half because I wanted to play it, and it was half out of spite, and part of it was that IGN refused to review it because it would offend some of the people at IGN, and I'm like, well, that's enough reason for me to buy it. And then immediately just gave it a 5. And I'm like, yeah, this is totally getting my money. Because you're trying to bash it, admitting that you're not going to review it as the game that it is, right? Because it's going to offend people. And then, do it that way. And I'm like, all right, fine. You go ahead and get my money for this one. And then another one that's kind of a sequel, kind of a re-envisioning, is Ghost and Goblins Resurrection, right? Which was kind of like a revisit, kind of
Right.
remix of Ghosts and Goblins. And honestly, Contra Galuga could actually fit on here too, that I hadn't put on here because that's kind of a mixture of a couple different Contra games. They mostly took a lot of the sensibilities and a lot of the stages of many of the Contra games in the past and worked them into a new game with its own story and pulling in new and old characters alike. Yeah, Resurrection is digital only. I thought they were going to do a physical release of that one at some points after, but I don't know that they did. And I never tried the ActRaiser reboot. I heard about that one and then I lost track of it.
I heard it was decent. I heard it was decent.
Yeah, Sethter said it was terrible. But then if you go back and you play the original ActRaisers, they're kind of more of an acquired taste these days than you think. The first one in particular, where the overhead section where you're doing all the sim type stuff, still works great. But when you start doing those stages and the controls are tough, dude. That is a very restrictive platformer game. What's up, Thumb? Good to see you. So it's kind of
Hey,
tough
Dom.
to go back and play that one effectively with the memories that you had of it as a kid because it really worked as a kid and it still works. It's still fun. It's just a lot harder to wrap your head around to kind of play it. I feel like. Oh, but the floating emojis work. What? Really, Ninja Chat? I don't know what it's doing. Man, I don't know what I did. I have no idea what's going on. I'll try to figure it out later. It's probably working, but it's probably buried somewhere and I can't see it. I don't know. Whatever. So those are kind of some of the ones that I just kind of threw out that we can discuss, and any ones that you guys throw out that are kind of out there that you guys want to talk about. I mean, we kind of talked a little bit about Tomb Raider. I kind of felt like it was kind of like trying to repop and reinvent the character, and flesh out her origin story more and not necessarily be a prequel. I thought they were basically just trying to kind of rewrite the whole thing. With it's not necessarily a bad take on it because I thought the character still worked good. I thought the gameplay was fine. Um, I only played the first of the three on the sequel, and I thought it worked. I thought thematically it worked fine and it was really cohesive. The only problem I had with it was Laura's on again, off again, where she's really traumatized by having killed this one person. And I kind of look at her funny because she just killed like 35 people with
30
a
feet right.
climbing axe to get to this guy who she's now torn
Right.
up that she killed. And I'm like, lady, you're a mass murderer. You need to just why are we here? Like, why is your headspace where it is? It's very confusing. So
Yeah.
that was the only part of it that I thought didn't quite work for me. There have been much worse ones where they've tried to basically almost retool it and redesign it, and then you've got new games
No,
coming out like Veilguard with Dragon Age and all that that has all sorts of crazy options on it. And not that I'm opposed to those, but well, that
I
needs to
am.
be a different
Sorry.
topic. That needs to be a different
That's a
topic.
different. Yeah, we can't talk about that on
Yeah,
YouTube.
well, we can. I just don't think it's. I
No,
don't
we
think it
can't.
fits within the confines of what we're trying to talk about. So I need to shut up about it. That
No,
needs to be a
because
different topic.
that is a sequel game. That's not a retro reimagining.
Right, right. It's just
And I
made.
still
It's
don't.
clearly made looking for that modern audience that hasn't really seemed to manifest itself in any meaningful way as far as the games are concerned. Right? Because
They
we've
don't
had a
buy those
couple of
games
those now that haven't worked. Right?
because
And
the people that are complaining don't buy those games.
right, but they're the same people that are kind of coming back in after some of these games, right? Like the Mario and the Thousand Year Door, where they're changing some of the language and stuff because now it's considered inappropriate, right? A lot of these games and properties, when you make a game like this, I feel like they need to be either you don't re release them and you leave them in the time capsule they're in, and people go play the original one, however they can play it. Or if you do remaster it, you need to leave the integrity and the wording of the way things are done intact. Because they even did it with like the Pixel remaster. There were a couple of changes to like I want to say it was Final Fantasy VI that they made that they kind of clipped a couple of things out, right? And that they just said just didn't work today. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not okay with that. If you're going to give me and charge me $30 for the game again, right? I want that experience scaled the way it was before. I want that same experience. Otherwise, why are you doing it, right? We're not talking like Final Fantasy VII that you're making into a three-parter of a game that will probably not finish until the PlayStation 9 at this rate, where you're basically expanding everything to the nth degree and changing the mechanics.
Hey, Galaxy.
We're talking about just HD remastering in pixel art form the existing game. And Galaxy says it looks like his graphics card is messing up and he tried to get in contact with Llama, but he's been MIA for a while. I haven't heard from Llama in ages. He can help troubleshoot or I might have to get a new one. Yeah, I would make sure it's seated really good. I would double check your cables, make sure they're seated really good, make sure they're still clean, and then I would try a clean reinstall drivers, man.
That sounds like
If it's
drivers.
only messing up in games, man, I'd try drivers, man. I'd try a complete,
Yep.
fresh, clean install of the drivers. If you have an NVIDIA, there's always an option on there where you can tell it that you want to do a fresh install, and it will completely uninstall all the drivers and then reinstall them fresh. So that might be your best bet right there to try to get things going. Sorry, a random. For those of you who are new to my channel, I sort of derail to troubleshoot from time to time. We're both in IT. And Lollipop and Mike, I don't know. I don't think you've got anything to say about that in your door, do you? Or
The lollipop, the chainsaw lollipop. I've seen them. I have not played them. So
I,
my issue is that a lot of these games, like that especially came over on the Nintendo side. I haven't played the originals, so
Well, Lollipop
getting into
Chainsaw
a
was an Xbox game.
no, it was, but you guys have been talking about ActRaiser and
Right,
and
right.
Link, but even like Chainsaw Lot, it wasn't. You also have to remember that there was a point in time, and I think this is when that game came out. There was a good 6 or 7 year period between when I gave up Next Level Gaming as a journalist and when I came back to YouTube. There was a point in time when I didn't play video games. Like I just didn't. So by the time I got back into gaming, it was 2014, 2015. And
Right.
well, no, it was before that. It was 2012, 2013. Games like games like that, I had not had a chance to play. So when those remakes come out, I don't know that it didn't catch me like other ones. I also have this thing about remakes that I'd rather play the originals if I could. Um, and I
Well,
know a
I
lot
think
of
in some
people.
cases it's justified, but I don't think in the case of some of these, I think they just like, especially the Lollipop Chainsaw. I think they just did an HD remake of the original game, right? Because
Mhm.
watching the intro of it, I'm like, even I'm sitting there going, "Wow, wow, really? Oh my god!" I'm like, Suda, calm, man, calm down. Because this was a Suda 51 game, and he's done some interesting stuff in some of his games. Like, if any of you guys ever played, and Mike, you probably didn't, was I think it's No More Heroes on the Wii, where
No, I did not, but I've heard that one. I've heard of.
it's a really good game, but in order to recharge his like beam saber thing that's his primary weapon, you have to shake the Wiimote like this. It's just as lewd as it looks. As you're doing it, so it's kind of like Suda's thing to be a little bit, out there on the edge. And so I was both surprised and not surprised by some of the language and some of the things that were being said in the game that I won't say because of YouTube, but would be totally fine. Like, you could stream this game on Rumble, you'd probably get demonetized if you stream it on YouTube. Let me put it that way. And I've only played like an hour and a half of it so far because I played it like one night to see how it ran and just to kind of dig into it a little bit and see how much I was going to enjoy it. And then kind of put it down, and I haven't got back to it again because I've been so sucked into Street Fighter 6 and still trying to play Monster Hunter Rise and a couple of other games.
Right.
So it's one of those things I kind of want to fix while I'm on vacation, just get a little bit more time into the game because it's been pretty fun. I wouldn't say it's the most fun game I've ever bought, but it's worth playing for sure. And Scrambles, I don't know that I'd say that the Thousand Year Door is not worth owning or playing. I'd say it's probably still fine. But yeah, that Nintendo's pretty bad about doing some of that stuff. Who's the shortest and who's the tallest Batman? I have no idea. I'll be honest. I never paid attention to any of their heights. I have no clue. Born. Hi, by the way. Streets of Rage 4, I thought was just an excellent sequel, and
Yes.
was kind of a key game to start getting people back more into the beat 'em
Yeah.
up genre.
So
And
so here's a good question about remakes and modern audiences. The the Sega games that they are talking about. The
are you talking
the
about like the Revenge of Shinobi and the Crazy Taxi and all those?
yeah.
I think Golden Axe is on their list too, isn't it?
I don't think Golden Axe is. Although Golden Axe got a remake. That's one where, and that's an interesting one, um, because on the Nintendo Switch, it got an update for, I say modern, not modern audiences, but it got an update to include some multiplayer online, some graphical updates, a little bit of
Golden
control
Axe?
update because obviously Golden Eye. You said Golden Eye.
No, I said Golden Axe.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. Golden Axe is not going to be. I see. So
Because
okay,
you were
all
talking
right. So
about
you
Sega
can.
remakes, and so I said Golden
I
Axe.
thought you. Yeah, and then I thought you said Golden Eye,
Yeah,
and I'm like, okay, well, wait a minute. We can go
when
to
you said
Golden
Sega,
Eye.
I'm like, and you started talking about a remake that I already got, and then you started said Golden, and
Okay.
I'm like, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
All right. So you said Golden Axe. Okay. So getting back to what I was going to ask, do you consider what you saw in that trailer to be remakes of those games? Or are they new games just in the genre?
It depends on how they approach them. I think you could do kind of just like a sequel to Revenge of Shinobi, or you could do like a reimagining of Revenge of Shinobi. But I don't know how they're going to approach it. To be fair, GoldenEye and Golden Axe are basically the same thing.
Yeah, down to the level design. See?
I mean, I always tried to pick up the Moonraker gun anytime I was playing Golden Axe. I mean, let's be fair.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, like, I don't know how they're going to do those. And I know realistically, they were talking about Crazy Taxi, and I don't know what you're going to do with Crazy Taxi. I mean, you could do Crazy Uber.
Well, they're making. I do know that they're trying to make that open world.
And see, I don't see that. Well, technically, Crazy Taxi was kind of sandboxish anyway.
Kinda.
I mean, it wasn't really like open world because you didn't. Sort of. I mean, you only really had one objective, and that was to earn as much money as you could in a given time period. But you had the whole area open. Whoever you picked up, you just took them to a location. So everything was kind of open in that game anyway, right?
Correct.
I mean, it's not like, say, Sonic Frontiers, where they made this entire open world and then had stages, right? And is that what they're thinking they're doing with that? I don't know. There's so little detail on those games right now, and they've kind of gone quiet after they made the one announcement, that I don't really have a clue what they're aiming to do with that. I mean, did you find more details that I don't know about? Because I saw the one announcement, and that was about it.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah, Scepter's saying he just wants the new Shinobi game. And then he said the Golden Axe one looked kind of like trash. But I haven't, it's been so long since I saw the footage of it, I wouldn't know. I would hope Sega would be developing the new Sega reboots.
They are. They're
Sega's still a software company. They should be able to get a team together to do that in house. I mean, it won't be the original teams, obviously. Half of them are like at least retired, if not passed on. You know what I mean? Because they were probably in their 20s and 30s when they did those games.
Yeah. I mean, Yuji Naka's still around. I don't
know that they're actively working though. I mean, I would hope that at some point they would retire for their own health.
What is Yuji? Well, Shigeru Miyamoto is still out there. So is God damn it! What is wrong with me tonight? Konami, Hideo Kojima. They're still out there, and in fact, Yuji Naka, even though he's not that much older than me. I mean, Yuji Naka is like 60 years old. He was the guy who, if you remember, he's co-creator of Sonic, but it wasn't but a couple years ago that he did Balan Wonderland. So he's still out there.
Yeah, I try to forget about Balan Wonderland, like I kind of try to forget about the Virtual Boy.
Most everybody.
Yeah, did. It was one of those that I was really excited for. I played the demo and my interest crashed. It just was not. It looked fantastic in the trailers, and I really, really wanted to love that game. And then the moment I got my hands on the demo, I was like, yeah, I'm not really feeling this, unfortunately. Which is sad because the kind of color and the characters and how everything functioned is very much in the vein of stuff that I was looking for at that time and still am, right? I still love playful, fun games like that. It just wasn't fun. It was whimsical and playful and designed. It just wasn't fun. It's kind of like Gunpei Yoko Gunpei and the Virtual Boy, right? I mean, you have the guy who's responsible for like the Metroid series, who's responsible for like, the Game & Watch games, who's like co-responsible for like Donkey Kong, and responsible for the Game Boy. And then he comes out with the Virtual Boy, and everybody's like, what? And I know if Panda was in chat, he'd be like, it's the best thing he ever created,
Right.
ever's.
Right. Oh.
He went out on a
Oh
swan
God.
song, and the rest of the world's going, not so much.
No. No.
But no, I think Lollipop Chainsaw is pretty much kind of it seems like from what little I played, pretty much identical to what it was before. It was just modern. It was just modernized in the fact that you can play it on a modern machine, right? And it still looks clean without having to do any like weird jerry rigging and stuff like that. It's an odd choice of games to pick because I don't remember there being a huge audience clamoring for it when it first came out. I mean, it had kind of a niche crowd that liked it, that I think still likes it, but it don't
Yeah.
remember it doing gangbusters.
I don't remember it either, and I don't remember a big hoopla over it coming out.
Yeah.
The remake. I don't. I'm not sure. And see, this is okay. This is where I get. Again, I'm more of a purist. I always have been, and where I get into
Born
these,
Pin
this
has
is
a
why I
Virtual
like
Boy poster in the ceiling above his bed.
above his bed. My God.
Nice.
Oh my goodness. It's why I like. So we talked. You said earlier I'm really into Antstream Arcade,
Right.
and the reason for that is because of what it represents, and that is this bygone era of what those games were like before somebody came in and messed with them. In my humble view, um, there. I'm trying to think of a remake that I truly enjoyed to a point. Like even there was a I remember when was it I don't know if it was Ubisoft that did it or not, but Ubisoft somebody tried to remake 13. The game 13.
Oh, yeah. I forget who did that, but there was something really key that they botched on that
Everything.
caused them all sorts of grief in that
Oh, it
game.
was horrible. And I ended up actually streaming the original Xbox version.
Yeah.
And it was it 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 was so much better.
I
And
can tell you
so
one that came out that held true to the original, kind of down to the T, it seems like. It just got scaled up. And it was Dark Forces.
yes,
Because
Dark
that was
Forces.
a
Now
straight
that
1-to-1 where they just scaled it into HD. And other than that,
yep.
they left it alone.
They yes and no. They did.
I
They
mean, they
did
added some new
put
cutscenes and stuff like that. And I think, and
well
that was about it.
well because it was a PC game. They they adapted it for controllers. So you did
Right.
have things like the analog, the dual analog sticks for moving and looking and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, for the most
I'm
part,
sorry, I
and
threw up a little
they,
bit in my mouth when you told me you used a controller to play that game.
to play this one, yes, of course. When I play, hold on, ho. On the original PC version, I had a Sidewinder force feedback joystick. That thing was badass. You kiss my ass. When I shot things, the joystick gave me force
Mouse
feedback.
and
It gave me
keyboard,
the
man.
recoil of
Mouse
the
and
gun.
keyboard.
Screw that. Not
Mouse
in a
and
game
keyboard.
like that. No. No. Not when you had a force feedback joystick. No.
Secret of Monkey Island was another one because
That
you could
was
play
another one.
the new graphics, which I thought were stellar, but you could also flip it back to the 8-bit version. And I think it was Jeff who mentioned that there was a way to do that on a couple of the other ones too. that he'd gotten, where you could see the 8-bit or 16-bit or whatever the original perspective was, but you could also play it with the new one, kind of at a flip of the button. And Dark
Yeah,
Forces
there
did that
was
too. I think there was a button for that
Dark
on
Force.
Dark Forces.
Not with a flip of a button, but you can get into the menu and change it really quickly. Um, and there were games like, because you're right. I know that Tecmo Bowl was one that they remade where you could play
Really?
the old and the new.
There was a
Yep.
call for Tecmo Bowl?
Yes, there was. Tecmo Bowl Tecmo Bowl is still one of the most popular football games out there. And I remember when
That's
they made
sad.
that.
That's sad. We've gone this far, and everybody still wants to play like the original Tecmo Bowl on the NES.
Bo Jackson, baby.
I don't know what I don't know if that says something really good about Tecmo Bowl or something really bad about the state of sports games.
I I think you know the answer. I think you know the answer. We both know the answer to that. But I'm trying to think. There were other. You are correct. There were other games that had that, and I'm trying to remember what they were. Give me a second. I'm going to take a quick game. Oh, Halo! The Halo Anniversary editions.
I thought
Those
that
were
worked
ones where you
fine.
could swipe.
I mean,
Yes.
they didn't add any extra checkpoints, but then that game didn't really need them. Some of these, I thought they kind of, I
Yeah.
thought they improved them in some ways by making them a little bit more accessible. Ghost and Goblins
Well,
Resurrection comes to mind in that manner, right? Because it's kind of
Halo
a new
didn't
game,
change.
but it's kind of a revisit. But depending on the difficulty you put it at, like you could adjust it to be as achingly difficult as you really wanted it to be, um, by using the slider, right, of difficulty.
But
Like,
Halo didn't change its gameplay. What Halo
no,
had was what Halo had was that instant ability to go back and forth between the original OG Xbox graphics and their updated graphics. And they did that for Combat Evolved and they did that for Halo 2.
yeah,
So that was the game I was trying to think of that did that.
okay.
There are others that did. I'm trying to look it up now to see because I know that there were other games that did exactly that.
Yeah, and there's some of these that they've added, like, and particularly if you go into like the fighting game genre, right? Because I buy tons and tons of fighting games, whether or not I get enough time to play them or not. Because there's only so many of these you can dump enough time into to truly get good at, right? But a lot of these that
Right.
they've added in, like the Street Fighter collections, the latest Marvel Fighting collection, where they've added things into them that are kind of niceties that have come into play with modern fighting games where you have training modes. And a lot of times they'll show you like the hitboxes and things like that. So they've added modes like that to a lot of these to allow people to kind of ramp up and learn these games, which is kind of great because before you would play them in the arcade and you'd either figure things out in the arcade or you'd go online to like GameFAQs back when GameFAQs was literally like all ASCII and text, right? Explain to you how things functioned in a video game, and you would come
They
back with a
still have a lot of
printout
that.
because you print out a page of like either moves or combos, right? And then you'd come into the arcade and you'd keep that in your pocket or put it down next to you so you could practice. And hopefully you get enough time to kind of get some muscle memory on it before somebody threw down a quarter or just put something in a slot and came in to like, kick your ass. Right? And that's just how those games functioned until you got them at home on, like, say, the Dreamcast or something like that, where you could play them that way. But the big problem on some of those games is when you go into them online now, is the difficulty curve of playing with people who've been playing this games for like 30 years now.
Right.
That's one of the reasons I bought the Marvel collection, and I'm like, do I go online with this? Probably not. Unless I'm playing other friends specifically online, probably not. Because I know I'm going to get caught in an infinite combo because half the cast or more had one and just get juggled to death until I die. And then my next character is going to get out. I'm inevitably going to make a mistake and get caught in another infinite combo. That's how those games functioned. by the time people got really good at them. But those are ones where they've actually added some of the modern sensibilities, but they haven't really done anything like some of the ones that I've seen them talk about, like some of the Dragon Quest remakes, they've added like extra clothing onto some of the models and things like that.
Right.
They kind of tone down like the skin and stuff like that. And I'm like, but nobody had a problem with this before, right?
Well, that's
Nobody was asking you to do this.
right.
So
That's what.
why are you doing this other than all of a sudden you're embarrassed by the designs that the creator of Dragon Ball came up with and Dragon Ball Z? You know, one of the most revered anime artists, period, who made pretty much all your art for Dragon Quest, and now you're altering his designs because suddenly you know better than somebody whose art's endured for over 30 years. It's kind of like going back and, you know, putting more clothes on like half the Greek statues, right? Because they're just not dressed enough now. And now that I've said that, somebody's probably going to go try to do it. It's things like that that I think kind of bug me, and things like that that I feel like are kind of a little dishonest, right? A lot of these are good, and while you can kind of argue that like at least Contra Galaga is a little bit too easy as far as a Contra game goes, you can make it harder if you want to, because there's options to turn certain things off and have one death kills and stuff like that and make it more Contra-ish if you want to. But the base game and the base experience that they want to present to you isn't that way, right?
Right.
It's not designed to be that kind of experience from the jump. Now, if you're a hardcore Contra fan and you need that fix, they have left you with that option. But they've added more modern audience sensibilities and more. They're not building games to keep you from beating it in one rental over the weekend anymore. They're building games to kind of keep an audience engaged for a longer period of time. And those are the kind of changes that I feel like are more or less pretty much okay in this space, right? Especially if you're making a new entry in the game and you're not going back and like if you were to go back on like the Contra re-release ones on it and change everything on those to where you had more checkpoints and, you know, you had all these modifiers and stuff like that, I would feel like that's not being true to the original game, right? But if you're making like a sequel to that game where you're trying to revitalize the series and you're taking kind of a new approach to it, then I feel like that's a little bit more admissible as far as how the content's handled in that case.
I would agree with that. If you are changing control schemes, and this is where you talked about this earlier, where you start changing dialogue and you start changing characters and you start de-offending people that might have been offended 40 years ago, blah blah blah. That's where
it's not even the people that are offended 40 years ago. It's the people that are offended today.
They're offended now, right?
Yeah.
That are offended now.
Which kind of that group I feel like doesn't really exist. Like it's this group that seems huge in the social media space, right?
And they're not. They're not.
But they're not that big of a group. Otherwise, you would see people coming in droves to these new games like Dustborn and Concord, right? They'd be showing up. These things would be selling like gangbusters, right? Because these have all those ticks, right? They're checking those boxes.
And they're not.
But
and the reason that
but they're telling the audience, the existing audience, that this game isn't for you, and they're going, well, okay, I'm looking at it and it doesn't seem like it's for me, so they don't buy it. And they're the opinion of like, well, for every one of you we lose, we're going to gain like 3 or 4 new people, right? And then those people don't show up to buy the game. And I feel like when you start taking some of these things that these people grew up with that now want to show these to their kids, and they want their kids to have this experience, and it's easier to pick it up on the new console that they know their kid uses and let them share that experience. Modifying that experience seems disingenuous to the intent and the art direction of that experience. And
Exactly.
there's not an audience for that. Your audience is the audience that bought it, that wants to show it to their kids. So trying to pander to a newer audience when you make a game like that doesn't, it not only does it kind of betray the intent of the people that worked really super hard on the game originally, it's disingenuous to the audience that's going to go back and buy it to have that experience again on their shiny new console, right? And it almost encourages it in the end for these people to go out, if they want that original experience, to get an emulated copy of the game and play that.
I
And
would,
not
and
one
that
on the
is,
online services that you could have modified the ROM itself to remove certain things that you saw as offensive.
and that is why I would rather play the originals. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are starting to get that way, where they would rather play the originals because the originals don't do that. Now, again, if you want to take and modernize the controls, right? If you want to add, so I'll give you a good example. If somebody ever remade Grand Theft Auto 2, which was the top down, I have it for the Dreamcast. It was top down. Um, it was very, very different than 3. Very different.
Well,
It
yeah,
was
that was the last
difficult.
one to have kind of an overhead isometric perspective before they went 3D with Vice City.
Correct. There, um, if they were to remake that, that control was really difficult. Really difficult. Because you you used up to walk forward, you used back to walk backwards, and you actually, I'm trying to think if you use the triggers. You either use the triggers or side to side to rotate your person. You didn't use the
Oh, it had tank
directions.
controls.
It had tank controls,
Okay.
which
Well, if you don't
were
have
they?
analogs, that makes sense.
Well, you do have an analog. There is an analog um, with the Dreamcast controller. The
Yeah,
problem
but there's
is
one. There's not two.
that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the problem is that there's one.
Yeah.
And so that becomes something that if you were to remake that game, I could see that being something you could use that as a way to change the game in a remake to upgrade to modern audiences, right? Because that's making the game easier to control,
Right.
right?
And
Change it so
Scramble
that
says,
it's
I'm
not
with
tank
Mike. I'll
controls.
play the originals. That's why I'm surrounded by game consoles dating back to the NES. And Scepter says that they're pandering to developers that are making these games, and they're in the minority. A few games lose like $2 billion and they'll get the message. And you would think that, but that's not always the case. They seem to kind of continue along this. They kind of seem to think that staying the course is where they need to be in a lot of cases. Um, but to games that have changed controls, I think that the Metroid Prime remake is an excellent example of that because it had GameCube controls. And while you can pick up a GameCube controller and throw it into the GameCube mode, you can just as easily use the dual analog stick mode on like either the Pro Controller or on the Switch like Joy-Cons themselves. Why you use the Joy-Cons, I have no idea, but you can. And play it that way as well. And I think they even have an option for some form of motion control if you prefer that methodology. Other than that, they basically just scaled everything up, right? And I think they threw in a couple
Right.
things to help you kind of guide you along the way if you got stuck that you can also turn off if you choose, right? So they've added a lot of that kind of accessibility and modernization, which is nice to have, but it's also nice to allow the player to customize it and turn that off if they want. Because if you're craving
Right.
that more authentic experience, but you want that HD resolution, you want it to look better on your more modern TV, or you don't want to go through with having to maintain all these old consoles and all this old gear, it's nice to be able to tweak things back to kind of that experience again. right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, there's the Resident Evil remakes, which I've heard nothing but good things about. I never got deep into the Resident Evil series. I did buy some of them, and I started playing the first one for a little bit, but it has trouble scaling on my monitor, so it's a little disconcerting because I can't make it take up as much real estate as I'd want. And I heard they're going to do even another remaster of that one, um, which doesn't even bring in the thought process of the eternal remasters of games like The Last of Us and stuff like that, where they keep remastering it for every single console, which I think is just
Ever
too
created.
much. Like it's all
Yes.
Naughty Dog seems to do now is remaster that game, which is just
Right.
ridiculous. Sonic
No.
and the Secret
Well,
of the Rings. I don't think I've ever played that one.
I haven't. I don't remember that at all.
I'm curious to, and I'm somewhat curious about the new generation's offering that are going to do with the Sonic, where they put Shadow in. I don't know if they're going to put new stages in that, or if it's going to be the same game just with Shadow available. I'm hoping it's got like all new stages, because otherwise that's going to be a really. I think that's just going to piss a lot of people off. Surprised that Vector games haven't been made for VR. You know, I could totally see that kind of working. I could see absolutely having a lot of
I
fun with some
could.
of those in there. That's actually not a bad idea. And I feel like that's where some of these games could go. I feel like you could take some of these ant stream things or stuff like that, and you could put them in like a virtual arcade where everybody could have their own avatar, and you could
Yep.
literally meet up, and you could be on the cabinet, and you could show the cabinet, and even maybe even show the controls as you're moving around as you're playing them or whatnot. You know, maybe you have
See,
your
something like
Xbox
that
or
would.
arcade stick in your lap or whatnot, and you're playing physically playing it that way, but you're moving around, you know, in the 3D space in a manner. You know, able to kind of look around and guide yourself around as you bebop around a live arcade.
Yep. Something like that would be cool.
Yeah, I think that would be kind of a really cool way to do it because they've already done some of that stuff with consoles. You can take some of these like old game collections where you literally like pull the card off the shelf and you put it into the game console, like with some of the Sega collections and stuff. And they put some of those into VR where you can like it's not the same obviously, but it's the closest that you can get in a VR space to having that kind of stuff around you. You know what I mean? If you don't have the space and the CRT TVs and all that kind of stuff, you know. If I were to set up a new area in my house, I would probably set up a CRT TV and something like an NES, primarily so I could play Zapper games and stuff like that again, because that kind of experience you really can't get now. They haven't
No,
found
you
a
can't.
really clean way of doing that. There's games that do it in a manner, but they don't feel as responsive as the ones of old, right?
Right.
It's kind of a modern adaptation to the way that TV technology has gone, but because it doesn't work the same way, you can't make that kind of work the same way, and that's why a lot of those have been mostly left untouched. And I never had I didn't even know about a Vectrex
I
until I
I
started
had
getting into
I
retro
didn't either.
gaming way late in life, and then I started learning about the Vectrex. I need to do a video on the Vectrex. That seems like it'd be a fun one to do.
Yep.
Those guys
But you
falling
know,
up.
you guys talking about that in VR. So now you want to talk about. So this is where you want to talk about modernizing things. You can. It would be cool to take some of the old vector graphics games and put them in VR. Could you imagine playing the original Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back arcade games in VR? I would love that.
I mean, just take some of the later arcade ones where you could do Death Star runs and stuff like that and put that in VR, and that would be fun enough.
Well, yeah, the Star Wars trilogy. How
Yeah,
about pod racing? I mean, things like that
pod
would be
racing would be fun.
amazing to do. But I mean, just taking those
Pod
old
racing would
vector
work
games.
great because they've already done that to an extent with the Kinect, and I thought that was actually the best part of the Star Wars game on the Kinect. Like the Kinect Star Wars game actually had a pod racer,
I It did.
and
If they
that
only
worked
had
great. I thought it
concentrated
was a
on that.
lot of fun.
Only they had concentrated on that.
And instead of making Han Solo do the Han Solo dance.
And the star and the fake lightsabering. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Rampaging as a Rancor was fun though.
Yes. Yes, it was. Was there a Vector Tron game? I don't think so.
I don't know. There were plenty of games that looked like Tron that they probably got the idea from Vector Graphics games. I mean, there was like a tank game on there that looked like something out of like the Tron movie from like the original movie. But I'm pretty sure that's probably where they got the design for the Tron tanks was probably something like that. If I were to hazard a
Probably.
guess. But there's a lot of those games that I feel like they could probably trying to think of what else we haven't covered because we kind of covered the list that I've talked about. Which
Yeah.
ones have you thought of? I mean, we didn't go too deep into Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, which was kind of a
No.
remake and kind of a remix. But the easier you made it, the more checkpoints you had, which I thought was a clever way of doing it. That way, people who weren't good at the game could go through the game. And then as they got better at the game, they could bump the difficulty up as they're completing more stages without needing those checkpoints. And then
Right.
progressively get through the game at more of the original Ghost and Goblins difficulty, which was, scream into the void and keep hitting continue. Well, you have to remember those games too. You had to loop the game twice in order to actually get the ending.
Oh yeah.
When you beat him the first time, you didn't really win. You had to do it again.
Yeah.
And Born
I'm
mentions
trying to think.
Maximo, which
I
was
really.
like a sequel that had come out.
Yeah.
That would be cool to see revisited. I think there's a time and a place for that one to kind of come back, or to make another one in that line. That would be kind of cool because that was more of a 3D take on that game.
I know Cousin Born mentioned the Sonic CD, but that really wasn't. See, Sega didn't do a lot of those in remake form. They just ported them, and that was something that was like I remember for a they had put out. Okay, here's one actually now, but that's a sequel. Toe Jam and Earl, Back in the Groove. That's a sequel, even though it pulls from the original game. But I feel like that's a sequel, so that's not a good one.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what
Some
a
of these I'm thinking
real.
of as like spiritual successors. Like you could
Yeah,
almost take like Shredder's Revenge. That's almost like
that's
a
a spiritual
spiritual
success.
successor
That's
because
not
it
a
feels
remake,
very
right?
much like the Turtles in Time and the original Turtles beat 'em up games.
It does.
Only
And yet,
you
the
can,
Cowabunga collection,
yeah,
which
but
was just a straight
that's more
port,
just
that's
an
just a
HD
straight emulated.
scaling and
That's just
compilation,
an
right?
emulated port, right? That's just a compilation. So I'm trying to. I'm really. I'm
This is
trying
why
to
we
think
need to have
of.
side conversations before we do these live, and you never do them.
No, but I still asking to cut like because you could come up with games like Bully. You can come up with game.
Yeah,
That
but
was a
they've
remake.
not even attempted Bully. Like
No,
they're gonna
I
do
thought
the
there was a
original
Bully.
Red Dead again before they'll
Right.
even look
So
at Bully. Because I don't think they want the smoke that's gonna come with Bully.
well, they did announce a remaster. They announced one.
Did they? I don't think it's gone
Yes,
anywhere.
it's due out. Hang on. I'll tell you when it's due out. PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and PC. Um,
Early 3D
it's
games that
supposed
are
to be
on
out
modern
next year.
consoles. Yeah, a lot of those
Yes,
feel like more compilations, Scepter, because like
they
when they
do.
brought Mario 64, they left Mario 64 intact. They didn't really do anything new
Yeah.
to it when they released it on the Switch. They just put it in a compilation, right?
Yep.
And yeah, the Night Dive
Well,
Studio
okay.
ones are some of the ones that I talked about. I brought up Dark Forces, and I knew they did a couple
Not
others.
Power Slave. So there was Power Slave,
Yeah,
or in that
didn't they do
it
something
was
with Thief?
they did Hitman's gotten remakes. I mean, if we're talking about okay, all right. So now I'm there. There are some other remakes that haven't come out yet that I
You're
know are
fine,
being worked
Born.
on. Like
Born's talking about what about
Prince of
homebrews making a game that's remade,
I don't.
and that,
Okay.
well, that brings in some of those too, because the Ghostbusters game they did like a modification where they added in Winston, and I think
Yeah.
they added in one other character too into it that you could play.
So
Other than that, I think it's the original game, but they added those assets to be able to get those extra characters in the game.
so I I had a conversation with Luke about this too, about what constitutes homebrew and things like that, or how does that constitute with those kind of things. I have this thing about homebrew where homebrew to me is not the same as a developer remaking a game and selling it. I don't know. I That's all. That might have to be a whole separate conversation. But
Why?
there
What
are some
defines a
other
homebrew and what defines
an
like an
indie game,
indie game? Because I think
right?
that's part of what you were talking about.
That is, and Luke and I were having a kind of a discussion. Like to me, homebrew is just something somebody puts out for the fun of it. For example, the TMNT Cowabunga collection on the Dreamcast was never. It's not made by Digital Eclipse. It was made by some dude who just wanted to put those games out on the Dreamcast. You can download the ISO for free, and he even has the covers that you can download and use for CD cases. I don't consider that an indie game. I consider that a homebrew. The Digital Eclipse version of the Cowabunga collection, which is an official collection, I do not consider a homebrew. I consider that an indie game. So, anyhow,
I wouldn't call the Cowabunga collection an indie game. I would call it a compilation.
but made by an indie developer
Kind of.
is what I'm getting at.
Kind
Well, they are
of.
well not before they became Atari, before they became part of Atari. They're not. They're obviously not now, but at
Yeah,
one
Scepter
point
says
they
usually the people
were.
making homebrews aren't really making any money, and I think that's the case with the Ghostbusters one too. They added those
Right.
assets, but I don't think they're asking anything for that. Scepter also said Not Dev Studios is working on doing System Shock. That looked pretty good. And I agree. That one looks like it's going to be solid.
Yes.
But there's a lot of these that they've kind of remastered and brought back, and either due to the way that they were handled or released, they've not done as well as they anticipated. The Battlefront games, the original two, got re-released, and this is another area where I think things get sticky on some of these things on when you bring them back and how you bring them back and what you bring back. And a lot of these strictly online experiences I don't think translate well moving forward if they're only online experiences. Now, if you had a campaign that happened to have an online and that online takes off again, that's great. But you're more or less the people that are going to come back to a lot of these games aren't ones that go, oh, well, I want to then there might be a crowd for this. Really loved Call of Duty 2. I wish they would just remaster that one and that would be the only one I'd play. And there's probably a small minority that will do that because there's still people that kind of play those Battlefront games. But I think you find the vast
Well,
majority of people aren't going back to those, right?
kind of funny that you mentioned that because the Modern Warfare games are getting remastered. So they're Modern
Really?
Warfare 3, for example. Oh yeah. So Modern Warfare 2 and 3. In fact, I started a stream of Modern Warfare 3 campaign remastered. It's in Game Pass now, actually. Oh yeah,
Okay.
those are becoming a big thing.
Now, are you going back to that
Um,
to play the story? Or are you going back to that to play the online? Because those
the
all
story,
had comprehensive stories when they launched. That was
the
back before they
story. I'm
started
going.
trying to launch them as multiplayer only games and then begrudgingly started adding the story back in.
No, I'm playing those for the story.
Okay.
No. The only online I'm playing right now is the Black Ops 6.
Yeah, I was about to say the only thing that I've been doing online lately has been stuff like Street Fighter, right? That's been the
Right.
main one that I've been playing online, and I might do some Overwatch too here and there if I get a group together that plays it. But that would be the only way that I would really play that one more actively, just because I don't have the. A part of this is an age thing, right? Because as I get older, I have less free time. More of my free time is
Mm-hmm.
taken up doing other things, be it like spending time with my wife or friends or work taking up extra time just as I get older and the
What?
projects that I'm in being more involved, right? Or just being exhausted by the time I come home and just not having the mental energy left after being in an office for 7 to 8 hours to want to engage with people on an online format, right? And I think that's a bigger part for somebody like me who doesn't necessarily come off as an introvert, but is more or less an introvert. I would happily sit in my house and not engage with other people for days, weeks, years, which I have done. And everyone's like, oh, thank God we're back in the office. And I'm like, really? Because I didn't really want to see you in person ever again. I liked my online relationship with you. It was comfortable. Um, I could have stayed at home permanently. Having to go out and engage with other people and other people talking around me and around my desk that aren't talking at me and being in my space like that, I find physically and mentally draining to the point to where often when I come home, a lot of my game time is either something solo that I don't have to engage with people, that I don't stream because I don't want to engage with people anymore. I don't want that connection. I need to recharge. Um, that I don't do those kinds of things. And so there's entire days where I come home and at first I'm kind of energized to go and play some Street Fighter. And by the time I spend the 2 to 3 hours doing all the chores that I have and coming to grips with how much time I spent out and in traffic and around other people, I no longer have that energy anymore to do any of that. So my online time is very minimal. So there's very few of those online type games that I would seriously engage with for any length of time for those particular reasons, right? So for me, with my kind of personality, those kinds of games are not ones that I would go back to for like a remaster or a remake. It would be like a comfort food type of game. Like The Secret of Manas or, The Golden Axe or Double Dragon. Like there's a Double Dragon Revive coming out by Arc Systems that looks pretty good. It would be
Right.
games like that that I would more or less lean into for those kinds of distractions. The kind where at most I have like a friend who comes over at some point and we spend some time doing that on say the couch or something like that while we're hanging out, not in an online atmosphere, right? Particularly as contentious as those can get sometimes. That's just extra levels of stress and frustration that I don't need on a daily basis, right? I don't know if you guys feel the same in chat or if I've just been babbling for 15 minutes.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I there are some times when I don't want to do those things either, right? I don't want to. I don't care enough to get that game session in, right? I get that. I understand that.
Yeah, and in Scrambles, I kind of want to get the Secret of Mana one as well. And no, Scepter, they won't let me stay home and work.
Bionic Commando
And the
Rearmed
Bionic
is a good
Commando
one.
Rearmed, I've got that, and I really do need to dig into it. It looks really cool.
It is. I have seen that. I do think that's a good one.
And it just comes down to some people are really outgoing people and they can engage with people all the time. And then you have introverts that never can go out and engage with people. And then you have people that are forced to be extroverts because they have to be, because it's part of their job. And then generally they come home and they need some time to recharge where their things aren't peoply. And they don't engage with other people in any way. They have to stop and recharge their social battery before they can re engage with people again. Somebody classified it as an extrovert introvert, right? Where you're kind of forced to be an extrovert, but you're really not much of an extrovert. You really don't want to be out in public engaging with people for long periods of time, and yet you have to because it's part of your job, right? You have to get over it. Like Shambles is like, I'm a machinist. I wish I could work from home. Yeah, my job can be done 100% remote. My company just doesn't allow it, right? So I go into the office
Mine is.
to remote into machines that I could remote into here. Which is as silly as it sounds. But I'm trying to
Well,
think of what else we
and
can cover on the actual topic tonight because our audience is kind of dwindling as it gets later in the evening. And I can't really think of much else that I feel like we really need to hardcore cover on this one, other
no,
than what we've covered.
I think we got it.
I feel like we probably need to be a little bit more prepared moving forward. So expect me to have us pick out a topic and probably discuss it on the side a little bit and maybe get a third guest. Because the two of us being a sounding board, I feel like is kind of
Well,
it's
yeah.
not working as well as it would if we had at least one other person.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I I think part of it is we need somebody else who has some of the experience with some of the things we're talking about too. Like again, we were talking about, when we're talking about uh Sega stuff, that's easy for me. And you guys,
Right.
when you're bringing up Metroid remasters and things like that, like remakes and remasters, when we get past what they are, I don't play a lot of them. I have an opinion as to why, as I've obviously said today, and how I would go about with doing them. But there's a reason that I have those opinions. It's because I make it a point to try not to play them, um, because they do get so there's so much of a desire to remake them to try to just make money that sometimes I think these companies forget about the original audience to begin with. And some of us are the original people that would also spend the money to buy the game. Um, and I did, while I accidentally went back to, went to GoldenEye instead of Golden Axe when we talk about Sega. GoldenEye, the point I was trying to make with GoldenEye was that was one where, and maybe it was contractual, maybe it was throwing Microsoft the bone, but the Switch version of GoldenEye was an actual remaster with control updates and all of that. The Xbox version was a straight 1-to-1 port of the N64 game with no enhancements at all and no online play that the Switch had. So if you're going to
Interesting.
do those, it came in Game Pass, so you didn't have to pay for it. But I'm like,
See, I heard
without
sketchy things about it, which is one of the reasons I didn't really dip into it. And I was never the GoldenEye fanatic. I was more of a Turok guy.
I really liked GoldenEye. It was one of the first real multiplayer console games that I played. In that way, first person shooter games. I mean, I'd always played the, Castle, the Wolfenstein 3Ds and all that stuff on the PC, and Doom and all that stuff. But what I never did is I never played console first person shooters. And GoldenEye was my first run at that.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Scepter, because I'm of two minds on that, right? Um, Rare is owned by Microsoft, and if they were involved in that, you would think that Xbox would get the better version, or at
But
least get the same version. Um, but there's also
but
that nostalgia for the game on the Nintendo console, which is where it was born, lived, and died for the most part. So I could see why they would get a
and
really good version of it. So that's the only
Well,
reasons I can think of, but it's confusing that they would not have gotten at least the
mm,
same
yeah,
version. It seems like
there's
the
another.
control scheme would have been the same.
So the real reason is that while yes, Rare is owned by Microsoft, the GoldenEye IP and that game was still owned by Nintendo,
Oh, okay. That
which
might be
is
why.
the same thing,
And yeah, the
right? The
GTA
same.
trilogy, well, I'm not a big GTA guy. I thought about dipping into that one until I
That
saw
was
how
yeah,
abysmal that was being handled. And I'm like,
that was
yeah,
a
I'll just
horrible
skip.
remaster.
Yeah, I'll
That
just
was a
skip
horrible
that.
remaster.
Yeah. So
Um,
I
and there's
avoided
games
that.
and there's remakes that are not that you know one of the other things that is becoming a big problem is these companies that are trying to do these remakes, they're running into issues. So KOTOR we talked about earlier. KOTOR's on hold.
Yeah, that
Um,
one's been in dev hell
there's
for a long time.
yeah, Asper was no longer Asper got pulled off of it, but there's supposed to be um, it's supposedly still in development, but of course all the stuff that happened uh, with Embracer Group that that didn't help.
What's up, Vinny? Good to
There's
see you,
another
man.
one. Hey, Vinny. Another one that was put on hold indefinitely was a remake of Prince of Persia: Sands of Time.
I vaguely remember hearing about that one.
Yeah, and it was going to be a 2024 game, and then it got put on indefinite hold. Those are the things that um, those are the games that, like there's Dragon Quest remakes. They were trying to remake Max Payne. There are there there are remakes that never really make it, right? So as early as April, Remedy had talked about a Max Payne remake. You haven't heard crap about it.
Yeah.
And that's another one that they're going to try to kind of make for a modern audience. And I don't know how they're going to remake. I don't know how they're going to remake Max Payne.
I'm not sure. I My thing is like I feel like something kind of. Let me think of how to phrase this. I think the best way to handle some of these moving forward is to use them to kind of gauge interest in the IP itself, right? Like take the Castlevania ones, or they recently re-released the DS ones, right? So those got reworked for the work on, say, the Switch or another modern console, which loses some of what was going on in the game with a few of them where you had like sigils that you had to draw and stuff like that. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
gameplay mechanic I crave to go back and play, so I'm okay with that kind of thing being removed, right? Other than
Right.
that, it was mostly like a map or being able to change equipment through there or something of that matter, right? So you're not losing a ton in that experience there. But the bigger thing with a lot of these collections that come out that I feel like they need to be more utilized with when they're kind of looking at these and modernizing from the audience is to gauge who's buying them and what response they're getting with the tweaks that they've made to how these have been retooled to see if there's a market for that IP moving forward. Because what we're seeing a lot of now is we're seeing a lot of remasters and a lot of remakes that don't really amount to anything other than just more of the same kind of collection, not really reinvesting in that particular IP. Look at all the Mega Man ones, right? You've had like four of those collections that have come out. More if you start counting like the network ones and the Star Battle ones that are probably going to come out and stuff like that, where they've remastered a lot of those again, and they're selling. But Capcom isn't. While they're talking about coming up with a plan of what to do with the Blue Bomber moving forward, they haven't really made any kind of moves that have really engaged past the point of, hey, let's get some money off of these people that are nostalgic for this and not really look at moving this IP forward in the future, right? You're seeing more
Right.
companies like Way Forward do stuff with some of these IPs, with doing like Double Dragon games and Contra games and things like that, and showing that there's a market for both young gamers and older gamers that want these kinds of IPs. But the main stakeholders that own these IPs aren't really waking up to utilize them, which is kind of, in my mind, it's leaving revenue on the table.
Well, what they're doing with Double Dragon though is those are all sequels. Like there's all like
It
I
still
don't
shows
know
that there's a
that.
market for those kinds of games, though. I mean, you've got Neon, you've got Caden, and
Yeah,
there was another one that came out too. I think that
yeah.
I'm not thinking of. The Blaster Master Zero trilogy, yeah, that's another one that shows that there's an audience for that. Matter of fact, I went through the first one as and liked it so much better than the second one. The second one is good, but I struggled to engage with it the same way I did in the first one. Matter of fact, I need to go through the first one again because I got the crappy ending because I didn't get all the items. Apparently, Sunsoft did a Trip World upgrade and remake. I don't know what that is. I know they had
Where would
I know they had a Sunsoft Lives collection that came out a while back that kind of showed that they were still around. But a lot of what I know of Sunsoft, or what I was big fans of Sunsoft back in the day, outside of Blaster Master, was a lot of their licensed IP games. They did an amazing job on a lot of licensed IP games that I don't think they get
Batman
the
comes to
licenses
mind?
again to be able to do them again.
No.
Vinny says the hot take pixels can stay pixels and polygons should stay polygons. Kinda yes, kinda no. I can see both ways of doing that
Well,
because sometimes if you take something from 2D to 3D or 3D to 2D, you can make a really unique experience out of it.
and again, are you remaking a game or are you making a sequel? That's
Right.
because again, a game that I would put in where Vinny is the different, the change between, the change between Toe Jam and Earl 2, Toe Jam and Earl 3, right? That went from 2D to 3D, completely different, but it's a sequel.
Well, when you look
Um,
at like Darksiders, like you had the Darksiders 1 and 2 that followed two different ones of the writers. You had the third one that followed in kind of a similar 3D vein, but then you had that random off the cuff one of Genesis that followed the fourth writer, right? And that was a completely different
mhm.
game type. It still worked, but it was completely different. What's up, J Dub? But
JDA.
that was a
Oh,
completely different approach gameplay wise to that type of game. So sometimes that kind of stuff can work, but I feel like that's kind of neither here nor there for this particular topic. So I
yeah, I
think
kind of
we're closing in
yeah
on the 2 hour mark. I can't think of much else I really desperately feel the need to cover. Mike, how about you?
yeah I think we yeah I mean again I you know I'll mea culpa on this one. It's the difference between talking about what should happen and games that are out there is more. I was more on the end of what should be, but then again, I'm not a good person to judge that anymore because I don't particularly. I think that, as I had said for earlier, it's that if you're going to do it to if you're going to do it and change control schemes and things like that, that's fine. When you start mucking with characters, you start mucking with the story, you start making changes that change the core of the game, that's when you lose me. And that's maybe where some of my biggest issue with where remakes are headed and why I don't pay as much attention to them as other people do.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it kind of goes back to what I've been talking about. If you're not going to make a new entry, or you're not going to make an entry that kind of starts to bring that audience back in, like Streets Raids 4, Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection is a great way of taking an older IP, trying to bring something back out of it by reusing
Totally agree.
some of the old vibes and assets, but making it a little bit more modern to try to draw an audience to see if this IP is worth pursuing. is a great way of kind of doing some of these. Being able to have some of these in collections, I'm not opposed to, because I'm one of those people that doesn't necessarily keep a lot of the older consoles around, and Andstream doesn't have a lot of the ones that I'm going to pick up. Right? They're just that
Right.
Andstream's more focused on a lot of that arcade feel, which is great, and a lot of the exceptionally older consoles. But they're not getting a lot of like my Genesis titles. They're not getting a lot of my Nintendo titles, and
No, they're not.
those are more what I'm nostalgic for, rather than just that arcade experience. So for those, these collections are good for somebody who doesn't keep a working NES around. You know what I mean? And doesn't necessarily want to do
No, yeah,
emulation on all these, or would at least rather support people putting some work into some of these and getting some of the modern benefits out of them.
fair. That's totally fair.
Like Contra Galuga scratches that itch too, because that's a more modern entry that takes a lot of its homage and a lot of its level design and boss design from previous entries, right? So while not wholly original, it's original enough in its own way and its own story approach, while still playing plenty of fan service to what fans of the series would want to see out of it. And to show more of the developers from like especially from the one that came out previously to that had that weird panda character in it, that yes, this IP works. Maybe not the way you tried to tool it, but it does still work and it does still have value. And I think that's where a lot of these can work. Where I feel like they start to fall down is when you start kind of looking at some of these and you start changing the original idea and concept of the game and you start to lose your audience. You take some of your art from your Dragon's Quest games and you tone it down for to try to desexualize a pixelated character that you're not really looking that closely at, or you're changing a character to trans, or now this character is obviously gay because they were always gay before. Well, maybe they were. Maybe it wasn't said. Maybe it was up to interpretation. Now you're making it a hardline fact, right? Doing stuff like that in some of these games, I feel, is not in the best interest of the game. It's not catering to the audience of it, and it's not giving people a true experience. Have you checked out Iron Meat yet? I have. No, I haven't, Brian. What? I'm afraid to Google that, Brian. I, I don't know what I'm gonna get.
Iron, iron meat.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm gonna get if I Google that.
I'm afraid
That's
you
kind of.
left me no choice, Brian.
I'm gonna let Mike take that one for the
Iron meat
team.
game. All right, that's not bad. Iron Meat's a fast-paced run-and-gun shooter that immerses players in a world overrun by the meat, an all-encompassing interdimensional biomass. Oh, hold on a second. Oh, this looks. Oh, Nick.
Hold
Oh,
on.
sugar.
I'm,
Oh, hold on. All right, hang on.
pulling up a video.
You want to see this? This is
Yeah,
Contra.
I pulled up some gameplay.
That's
It kind of
nice.
reminds me of Blazing Chrome a little bit, but it's a little more
A little bit, but
contrast.
that's Contra. And that's
Yeah.
coming out. Hold on. That's coming out on Thursday for Steam, Switch, PlayStation, Xbox. mm.
That'll be a fun one to
Mm.
play.
Mm.
That name is tragic.
Yeah.
That's a tragic name. The game looks fun though.
Oh, yeah, it
I get a
does.
lot of carrion pixelization vibes on it, whereas we're kind of more like 16 to 32-bit pixelization out of it than I do 8-bit, and I'm not opposed to
Ooh,
that. It
that is
looks good.
multiplayer.
Oh, it's multiplayer.
Yes, it is.
Gender bend and race swap everything, double the price. Yeah, that's kind of what it seems like they're doing, J Dub, and that's
Yeah.
kind of the problem that I have with
Yeah.
it. Now, if you want to make a new IP and you want to do that with your new IP, that's fine. But how they're getting sales, any sales on half this stuff, it feels like these days, is they're taking an established IP and they're reworking it into something it's not to try to get people to buy into whatever it is that they're selling. And that's
Right.
not necessarily what anybody wants when they're looking at those particular IPs, and that's where the crux of the problem comes in. Okay, I may end up picking this one up. I have no idea when I'm going to get to all these games, but I've got so many games right now. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I think we're going to put a pin in this here, and that's what you get when you're taking Viagra.
Always count on Brian.
Crable says the objective is to beat the meat. I'm just saying. I mean, even the boss on the first stage looks like a Contra boss from like the fifth stage of Contra. It looks like a sub boss. That's funny. They have totally ripped off Contra. That's funny. I'll have to see if I can find that and wishlist that. That'll be another one I buy this week because I'm already buying that G.I. Joe beat 'em up this week. That's already a given. All right, you guys are spending all my money. I gotta leave.
Ah, ah,
Thank you guys for hanging out. Thank you everybody who rated tonight. I appreciate it. Um, and hanging out with us for a little while. I know this was a little. It was more scatterbrained than I wanted it to be. Uh, my goal when we brought this back was to have more talks with Mike, get more guests lined up, to have you guys more engaged both in chat and coming on to the show, to spend some time with us on topics that you guys are passionate about and want to talk about. That's still in the works. We've still not hit that groove yet. This is the second one we've been back, and we kind of get derailed on this one anyway because the Dreamcast thing came up right as we came back. So that was kind of the right topic to cover at that time. So, Mike, I'll probably be more in touch with you between weeks on these things as we figure out which ones we want to cover and who might be a good guest to bring on some of those because I would like to start doing that more. So I feel like the two of us is fine, but having more people engaged on this is probably better for the show overall for its longevity.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
But for now, we're going to call it a night and get out of here, guys. We appreciate you guys coming in and spending a little bit of time with us.
Always.
Pick up a controller, play some games, as Mike always says, and happy gaming.
On gamers.
Mike, what you got going on this week, by the way, before we
Oh,
completely bounce?
uh,
Sorry.
that's all right. Tomorrow is Tuesday Night Live. So for people who have not been into our channel in a while, we have scrapped the all talk show, and we now have a kind of neat mix of we do some game talk at the beginning and then switch over and actually play some games, and people jump into the chat, and we talk and debate and argue and stuff, but we're doing it while we're playing. And
Okay.
so it's a bit of a and it's an open Xbox party forum. So people that want to jump in and talk, there's basically no guest thing needed. You just come on in. So that's what we're doing on Tuesday nights, and Peter's back on Wednesday for his Wednesday night live, and then I'll be back Thursday with Thursday Night at the Arcade, the Antstream Arcade weekly show.
Okay.
That's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Well, I'm off this week, so the only major thing I have coming out is I have another rare arcade game experience, rare game experience, I should say. This one's a PC game that's going to be coming out on Wednesday. I might try to do a little bit of streaming here and there. I'm not holding myself to anything. One, because I often just don't have the energy to really do a lot of streaming. I It's not my strong point. Let's put it that way. Um, So, but we'll see how things turn out. I might feel the drive to just play something and stream it, so I can get myself okay to play it a little bit longer than I might normally. It might be the Astrobot thing. It might be an indie game because I know there's that there's the GI Joe game coming out this week. There's a bunch of Street Fighter 6 I want to do because I think Terry just dropped now. So I'm kind of chopping my bit to get a hand on him. There's the new content coming out for Mortal Kombat that's coming out this week as well. So there's an entirely new story coming out, entirely new story arc that I haven't covered that could be fun to do. So that could be another thing I might be doing. I don't know yet. I know I'm going to be doing a lot of writing and editing this week while I have time off. And I'll definitely be doing some gaming with people here and there on Rumble that may not be live. This primary channel I want to be for the RetroRoots show and for uploaded content on both platforms. I feel like that's where that audience is best served. So there might, if I do streaming, it'll be another channel that comes up. I know I've mentioned that multiple times. I've just not pulled the trigger on it. I've just not felt strongly enough to pull the trigger on it yet. That's really where it lies at this point.
Sure.
So if and when I do, I may or may not make an announcement on it. I'd almost rather it just get an audience as it gets an audience. And if it doesn't get an audience, whatever. I don't... I have no strong opinion on it one way or another, but I do appreciate when you guys show up and hang out here. It's always greatly appreciated.
Yeah, we do.
I love it when you guys come by and watch the videos even more because that's where I put a lot of my time into. So I appreciate every single one of you guys that do that. But the next game stream will be Nintendogs. My wife's been pushing me to get back into the Power Wash Simulator and games like that. She's like, "You're just happy when you play those. You're not stressed."
That's because power washing. How do you?
I mean, you could stress over it. You really ain't on it. What's up, Dyer? Good to see you, man. You guys rated at the wrong time. We're about to cut it, man. I appreciate you guys coming in though. But yeah, we will see you guys all next time. So later, folks.